that the Nationalist Populist right-wing party, the Alternative for Germany, or the AfD, is threatening to push for a so-called DEXIT referendum if the European Union just doesn't institute what they consider to be the necessary reforms for its sustainability. Specifically, the AfD wants to see the EU restore the sovereignty of each of its member states and give up its project of becoming a globalist superstate on the one hand, and it wants the EU to take action against what they call the Islamization of Europe within the next 5 years. So this is the latest addition to the party's platform in anticipation of the upcoming European parliamentary elections in May of this year. And what the AfD's position is basically, it's basically this. The EU has evolved into an undemocratic structure that's made up of an elite aristocratic political class that oversees non-transparent, uncontrolled bureaucracies that are dominated by the particular interests of a donor class such as George Soros. We actually have evidence of a number of examples of bureaucrats meeting with representatives from the Open Society Foundations, which is the command center, as it were, of Soros' spider web of non-governmental organizations that actively campaign for open borders, increased European centralization, progressive liberal lifestyle values, and the like, with billions and billions of dollars being pumped into the pockets of these bureaucrats. And so the AfD is saying that there is an absolute need to completely rebuild the European alliance by 2024. And they're giving this a 5-year window. And of course, if these reforms are not implemented, then it's now the official position of the Alternative for Germany to consider a withdrawal of Germany from the EU, or to at least help facilitate its orderly dissolution and replace it with a new nationalistic-based economic alliance. Now, of course, experts are dismissing this call for reform or exit as little more than a political stunt. They see Germany in many ways as the heart of the EU. Some wonder openly whether or not the headquarters really is Brussels and not far more practically Berlin. Needless to say, they're not taking this proposal very seriously. But like the Brexit back in the summer 2016, we do have data that suggests that there is a very real groundswell of support brewing underneath the surface for something very much like a Dexit within the German population. First, of course, you have the stunning emergence of the AfD itself. We have to remember that the Alternative for Germany as an organized political party is barely 5 or 6 years old. And in that time, in many respects, it's done the unthinkable. It's won elections in each of Germany's 16 states, taking a sizable percentage of voters away from both the center-right and the center-left. They stormed into parliament back in the fall of 2017 when over 6 million Germans voted for the AfD and gave them over 13% of the vote. And keep in mind, this was their first electoral showing ever. Their very first national election garnered over 6 million votes. And since then, they've only increased in their support. They've won substantial percentages in Bavaria and Hesse and are currently polling as the #1 party in places like Saxony in Eastern Europe. In fact, the 3 regional elections in Eastern Europe coming up later on this year are expected to be very, very good for the AfD, and as a result, they'll be nothing short of a further blow to what remains of Merkel's fledgling political power. Moreover, the AfD appears to be just getting started in terms of its future influence in German society. We need to remember that the AfD has one of the youngest membership bases in all of German politics, with an average age of 47 years old. So we can expect that they're going to be around a little bit longer, indeed for a long, long time, with such a young voting demographic. So the rise in popularity of the AfD itself is indeed an indicator of changing dynamics within the German population. But secondly, more and more scholars are recognizing that the so-called, shall we call it, welcoming culture, right, of Germany, it's begun to noticeably wane, with an increasing number of Germans beginning to see immigration as a threat to the identity and stability and sustainability of their nation, and they don't see their political leaders as responding to those concerns. Some recent polling throughout Europe asked voters whether they thought that the traditional parties and politicians cared about people like that. In fact, if I recall, the proposition is in the negative. They asked citizens whether they agreed or disagreed with the statement, traditional parties and politicians don't care about people like me. over 50% of Germans, a clear majority, agreed with that statement, that traditional parties and politicians don't care about people like me or my concerns. Now, just to put this in perspective, only a small percentage more, 58% of Brits, agreed with that statement, and they voted for Brexit. So the 52% of Germans agreeing with that sentiment is not good news for the future of the EU. The dissatisfaction with political leadership is one of the major reasons we've seen the collapse of the center-left in Germany, indeed throughout the whole of Europe. The Social Democrats in Germany have fallen from 41% in 1998 to 21% today. They've literally been cut in half. And we're seeing consequences, of course, for the center-right as well. Angela Merkel's center-right Christian Democratic Union saw their vote drop in 2017 to its lowest level since 1949. Same thing happened with their otherwise rather conservative coalition partners in Bavaria, the Christian Social Union, whose last election back in October saw their worst performance in decades. Again, much of their support having defected over to the AfD. And so even the New York Times admitted that in order for Merkel to politically survive, she's had to agree to border camps for migrants over the summer, right? Which in effect shut down what we might call the pipeline of over 1 million migrants that have been coming into Germany since 2015, and with good reason. One government-sponsored study found that violent crime rose in one German state by over 10% in a matter of just 2 years, with 92%, I'll say that again, 92% of the increase attributed to migrants, young male migrants. This is why a recent poll found that 62% of Germans want refugees turned back at the border. They don't want them coming into the nation. And an astonishing 86% want faster deportations. Nearly 90% of Germans want migrants kicked out quicker. This is why Merkel's government almost completely collapsed over the summer when her own interior minister from her coalition partner in Bavaria, the CSU, demanded that she enforce the Bavarian border akin to the kind of enforcement that's going on in Austria under their new nationalist right coalition government. And when Merkel basically said no, well, then he threatened to do it himself, which of course jeopardized the stability of the entire coalition. All of this is to say is that Germany, like France and Britain before it, is incredibly vulnerable right now to a massive political earthquake that could forever decide the fate of the EU. Those who dismiss the AfD's call for a Brexit-like referendum as unrealistic or just a mere political stunt don't have a very good track record for predicting the outcome